The company had been built with tired hands and long nights. It started as a small idea in a rented office with old furniture and broken fans. Over the years, it grew slowly, brick by brick, contract by contract. The father believed in honest work and steady growth. He knew every worker by face, remembered birthdays, and never missed a chance to say thank you. For him, the company was not just a business. It was proof that patience and effort could change a life. When illness came, it did not arrive loudly. It slipped in quietly, like something that did not want to be noticed. At first, it was small signs. Missed meetings. Shorter days at the office. Long pauses while speaking. He brushed it off, saying he was just tired. He always said that. But the tiredness stayed, and the doctor's visits became more frequent. Soon, the family realized that the man who once carried everything alone could no longer do that. The main character watched all of this closely. From childhood, the company had been part of daily life. Dinner talks were about clients, workers, and plans for the future. Weekend visits to the office felt normal. The sound of keyboards and phones was as familiar as the sound of traffic outside. Still, no one ever said this would one day be their responsibility. The father believed there was time. He always believed there was more time. When the illness became serious, the company felt the change immediately. Decisions slowed down. Meetings were canceled. Clients began asking questions. That was when the senior executive stepped forward. He had been with the company for years and knew how things worked. He spoke confidently and promised stability. He said he would handle things until the family was ready. His voice was calm, and his words felt safe. The family trusted him. They had no reason not to. The father trusted him too. From his hospital bed, he signed papers he barely looked at, believing the company was in good hands. The executive reassured everyone that nothing would change. He spoke often about loyalty and respect. He reminded people how much he owed the founder. His actions seemed kind, almost caring, but small things began to feel off. The main character noticed it first. Emails were no longer shared. Meetings happened without notice. Workers who had been around for years were suddenly pushed out. When questions were asked, the executive smiled and said it was necessary. He said the market was changing and tough choices had to be made. His smile never faded, even when people looked uncomfortable. At home, grief filled every corner. The father grew weaker by the day. Conversations became short and heavy. The main character wanted to talk about the company, but it felt wrong to bring it up. Family came first. The business could wait. That was what everyone believed. They did not know how fast things were moving without them. The night the father passed away was quiet. Too quiet. No dramatic moments. Just a slow goodbye that left a deep emptiness behind. The house felt different after that. The silence felt heavier. The main character stood near the window, looking at the city lights, thinking about all the things left unsaid. The company was one of them. After the funeral, reality returned quickly. Bills, documents, and unanswered questions piled up. The executive visited the house, bringing condolences and paperwork. He spoke gently and offered support. He said the company was struggling more than expected. He used words like loss, risk, and survival. He said the father had been holding things together by force of will. And now the truth was showing. The main character listened carefully. Every sentence felt like pressure. The executive explained that selling the company might be the only way to protect what was left. He said it would honor the father by preventing complete collapse. He promised that jobs would be saved and the family would be financially secure. He spoke as if the decision had already been made. When hesitation showed, his tone changed slightly. He warned that waiting too long could make things worse. Buyers were interested now, but might disappear later. He talked about debts and competition. The words felt heavy, but they also felt rushed. Still, the family was tired and grieving. Fighting felt impossible. The main character asked for time. The executive agreed, but his smile looked tighter than before. Over the next few days, messages came constantly. Calls, reminders, updates. Every conversation ended with the same conclusion. Selling was the smart choice. Selling was the only choice. Inside, the main character felt something was wrong, but could not fully explain it. There was no proof, only a quiet sense of unease. Trust battled with doubt. Grief made everything harder. In the end, the pressure won. A meeting was scheduled. On the morning of the meeting, the main character walked into the company building for the first time since the funeral. The halls felt colder. The walls that once felt welcoming now felt distant. Familiar faces avoided eye contact. Something had already changed. In the conference room, papers were laid out neatly. Lawyers sat quietly. The executive stood confidently at the head of the table. He spoke about the future with excitement. He talked about new opportunities and personal growth. He smiled often, especially when explaining how well the deal turned out. The main character sat silently, listening, observing, remembering the father's voice and values. Each smile from the executive felt heavier than the last. The company was being handed away, and he looked proud of it. What no one in that room noticed was the calm in the main character's eyes. Beneath the grief and silence, there was awareness. There were memories of late-night talks, quiet lessons, and careful planning the father never shared with others. Things he trusted only one person to remember. As signatures were placed on paper, the executive smiled wider. In his mind, the chapter was closed. He believed the story was over, but for the main character, it was only beginning. The first days after the sale were strange and heavy. The office felt different, almost hollow. Workers whispered quietly in corners, afraid to speak too loudly. The executive walked the halls with his usual calm smile, giving orders and instructions as if nothing had changed. Yet everything had changed. The company that had once felt like a home was now under the control of someone who only saw numbers and profit. The main character observed all of it, careful not to act too soon. Every interaction, every change was noted silently. Workers who had been loyal for years were reassigned or told their positions were no longer needed. Some accepted the news with quiet resignation, others with silent resentment. The air was thick with uncertainty, tension, and the weight of betrayal. It was painful to see familiar faces lowered in spirit. The father had treated every worker like family. This new reality was harsh and unkind. Clients began calling, curious about the sudden change in leadership. The executive answered confidently, promising that the company would remain stable, that services would continue uninterrupted. He smiled often, and his charm convinced some people. Others, however, noticed a difference. Decisions were slower, promises were vague, and the warmth that had been part of the company culture was gone. The main character felt a quiet anger rising, but kept it hidden, knowing that action required patience and precision. The first major meeting with clients under the executive's direction was a moment of tension. He stood at the head of the table, speaking about growth and innovation. His words were smooth, polished, and calculated. He painted a picture of a bright future, free from the complications of family involvement. The clients nodded politely, but subtle glances showed doubt. The main character watched the interaction closely. It was clear that the executive was proud, perhaps too proud, of the deal he had just completed. He believed he had secured a personal victory, and the world, or at least the company, was at his feet. Meanwhile, the main character spent long hours reviewing documents and company records left by the father. There were financial reports, contracts, employee histories, and even personal letters detailing plans for growth and expansion. The father had been meticulous, careful not to leave anything vulnerable. But in all the files, one set of documents stood out, a secret transfer of ownership. Years before, the father had quietly ensured that the main character would have full legal control of the company when the time came. The details were hidden well enough to prevent anyone else from noticing. Even the most attentive observer, the realization was powerful. It explained the unease the main character had felt since the executive began maneuvering behind the scenes. The sale, which the executive thought was clever, was actually flawed. The ownership papers held the key to reversing everything. The main character knew it was too early to act. Patience and strategy were necessary. A direct confrontation would alert the executive, who would then attempt to cover his tracks. Observation and planning were required first. In the days that followed, the main character began speaking to trusted employees quietly. Some were loyal, others simply wanted clarity. Conversations were careful, deliberate, and low in volume. Questions were framed in terms of curiosity rather than accusation. People shared what they had noticed, little details that seemed harmless, but when put together, painted a different picture. Every whisper, every shared worry, became part of a larger understanding. The executive was overconfident. He had underestimated how deeply the main character knew the company, its operations, and its people. Meanwhile, the executive continued with his plans. He scheduled meetings with potential buyers and investors, eager to prove that he could run the company successfully. He spoke about expansion, new ventures, and modernization. He ignored subtle warnings from employees who tried to explain that sudden changes could be damaging. His confidence was unshakable, and he believed he was untouchable. In public, he appeared calm and friendly, but behind closed doors, he was impatient and restless. He often spoke with an exaggerated charm, perhaps to convince himself as much as others. One afternoon, the main character attended a board meeting under the pretense of observation. The executive presented charts, graphs, and projections. Numbers looked impressive on paper, but the main character noticed the small inconsistencies, overstated revenues, understated risks, and subtle omissions. It was a pattern that could cause problems if not corrected. The executive smiled through it all, completely unaware that someone in the room knew the truth about the company's ownership and had the documents to prove it. Outside of the office, the main character worked quietly on personal preparation. Lawyers were consulted discreetly, legal procedures reviewed, and strategies considered. Every action was deliberate and measured. There was no rush, no need to expose anger or frustration. Timing would be everything. The main character understood that immediate confrontation could backfire. The goal was to reclaim control without causing unnecessary disruption to employees, clients, or the company's reputation. Strategy and calm observation were paramount. As weeks passed, the executive's confidence only grew. He held meetings, signed contracts, and celebrated minor achievements. His smile remained constant, a mask of self-assured triumph. He never suspected that the sale he so proudly completed was not valid in the eyes of the law. Every step he took unknowingly brought him closer to a moment of reckoning that would catch him completely off guard. The main character also took time to connect with employees personally. Simple gestures, checking in on workloads, listening to concerns, acknowledging small victories, instated a sense of trust among staff. People who had felt lost and abandoned began to feel hopeful again. The contrast between the executive's impersonal approach and the main character's genuine care became increasingly clear. It was subtle, but important. Morale, once low, slowly began to stabilize under the quiet influence of the rightful owner. Then came a turning point. A potential investor arrived at the office for a high-profile meeting. The executive prepared meticulously, showcasing charts, presentations, and testimonials. Confident in his control, he did not notice the subtle gestures and glances among employees. They had begun to realize that someone else held the real power behind the scenes. Small acts of support, small hints dropped in conversations, indicated a growing awareness of the truth. During the meeting, the executive spoke animatedly about future plans, making promises and assurances. The main character sat silently, listening carefully, noting every misstatement, every exaggeration. These details would be important later. Observing the executive, it was clear that he was blinded by his own sense of triumph. His overconfidence was a weakness, a flaw that would soon be exposed. The main character felt no immediate need to act, only a growing certainty that the moment to reveal the truth was approaching. As the meeting concluded, the investor expressed interest but also asked subtle questions that the executive struggled to answer convincingly. The main character noticed the discomfort, knowing that small cracks were appearing in the facade. The executive smiled and reassured everyone, but the main character saw the first signs of doubt. Confidence can be contagious, but so can uncertainty. The shift was small, almost invisible, yet it marked the beginning of a change that would grow rapidly. Afterward, in a quiet corner of the office, the main character reflected on the unfolding situation. The executive was unaware of the hidden ownership, unaware of the legal power that had been quietly held all along. His overconfidence, his smiling facade, and his underestimation of others were all leading him toward a dramatic revelation. Patience, careful observation, and strategic preparation were turning the situation in favor of the rightful owner. The main character also considered the emotional side of the journey. It was not only about reclaiming the company, it was about honoring the father's legacy, restoring the culture he had built, and ensuring the employees who had remained loyal were valued. Each step had to be taken with care, avoiding unnecessary conflict while still asserting rightful control. The balance between justice and compassion was essential, as days turned into weeks. The main character continued to watch, listen, and plan. The executive, unaware of the looming truth, continued to smile, celebrate, and maneuver. The company moved forward on the surface, but beneath it, foundations were being quietly observed, understood, and prepared for a moment that would change everything. The executive believed he had one, but the main character knew the real story was yet to be revealed. The tension built quietly. Every smile from the executive, every confident statement, and every casual remark about the company's future became a small thread in the larger web of planning. The main character did not act impulsively. Actions would be precise, deliberate, and decisive. The stage was set. The pieces were in place, and the executive, smiling and proud, had no idea that his apparent victory was temporary, fragile, and about to be overturned in a way that would leave him stunned and speechless. The main character spent the next few weeks digging deeper into every detail the father had left behind. There were ledgers, contracts, emails, and personal notes. Each page told a story, revealed a decision, or explained a hidden plan. Among all of it, the documents that mattered most were the ones the father had carefully kept secret. They were hidden in a folder, labeled in a way that only someone close to him would understand. Inside were legal papers showing the transfer of ownership, granting the main character full control of the company in a way no one else could dispute. This discovery changed everything. The sale that the executive thought was permanent was actually invalid. The power to reclaim the company lay quietly in the hands of the main character, waiting for the right moment. It was a secret that had been protected for years, hidden from the world, and now it was the key to restoring what was lost. But patience was required. Acting too soon could alert the executive, who would scramble to cover his mistakes. Timing had to be perfect. The main character started small, quietly reconnecting with employees, listening to their concerns, and observing their loyalty. Many of the staff had been loyal to the father, and some were quietly uneasy with the executive's leadership. By showing empathy and understanding, the main character began to rebuild trust and slowly gather allies. It was subtle work, requiring care and discretion. There was no need for confrontation yet. Observing the executive while quietly asserting influence behind the scenes was more powerful than any direct action. Every day, the executive continued to celebrate his supposed success. He held meetings with investors, made promises, and presented plans as if the company were completely under his control. He smiled confidently, unaware that someone in the room already knew the truth. His overconfidence blinded him to subtle clues. A careful question here. A hesitant employee there. Small details that indicated loyalty was shifting quietly. The main character watched every move, noting weaknesses, patterns, and opportunities in the evenings away from the office. The main character studied legal strategies, seeking ways to make the transition smooth and indisputable. Lawyers were consulted discreetly, and procedures carefully mapped. The goal was not revenge, but rightful restoration. Every detail was considered: contracts, shareholder agreements, and the process for reclaiming control. Precision mattered. Any misstep could give the executive a chance to resist, complicate the process, or even harm the company's reputation. The main character was determined to act responsibly. One day, a key employee approached privately, expressing concern about changes in workflow and staff morale. The main character listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions. Each conversation revealed small cracks in the executive's control. The more employees spoke, the clearer it became that the executive's leadership was unstable. These insights were invaluable. They confirmed that the timing for reclaiming the company could be chosen strategically, ensuring the transition would be swift and complete. Meanwhile, the executive continued planning his future. He spoke of expansion, partnerships, and modernization. He worked tirelessly to impress clients and investors, believing that his actions were securing a permanent place at the helm. His confidence, which had been so striking, began to feel like arrogance. He underestimated the knowledge, patience, and preparation of the main character. Every plan he made brought him closer to a situation he did not understand. A situation where his carefully constructed empire was about to be questioned. The main character also focused on the company's reputation. Public perception mattered. Employees had seen loyalty shift, and clients had begun noticing subtle differences. By maintaining calm communication, listening to concerns, and making small improvements quietly, the main character reinforced trust without revealing the legal advantage yet. This careful balance was essential. The company needed stability while the executive's overconfidence set the stage for revelation. At home, reflection became an important part of the strategy. The main character thought about the father's life, his dedication, and the lessons he had learned. Each decision, each hidden plan, and each act of patience was guided by respect for the father's legacy. It was not about personal revenge. It was about restoring the integrity of the company, protecting employees, and honoring the values that had been passed down. Every step forward was measured, purposeful, and aligned with this principle. In the office, small victories began to show. Employees who had felt uncertain started to respond positively to the main character's presence. Workflows became smoother, communication improved, and morale slowly returned. The contrast between the executive's distant approach and the main character's genuine care became more obvious each day. Employees began to share insights more freely, revealing issues that the executive had overlooked. These small revelations built a picture of opportunity, one that could be used at the right moment. One afternoon, the main character overheard a conversation among the executive and a potential investor. They were discussing the company's financials and future projects. The executive was confident, but his answers to detailed questions were incomplete. The investor noticed the gaps and asked follow-up questions that the executive struggled to answer convincingly. The main character quietly took note, understanding that this was a small opening in the executive's otherwise solid facade. It was proof that preparation and knowledge gave real power, even in a situation that seemed hopeless to outsiders. As the weeks passed, the main character refined the approach. Every interaction, every observation, and every legal consultation became part of a larger plan. Employees were subtly reassured. Clients continued to feel stability, and the executive remained unaware of the true ownership. The main character did not act impulsively. Instead, careful timing and precise actions were the focus. This was a game of patience and intelligence, and every detail mattered at the same time. The main character prepared for potential resistance. The executive, if confronted, might attempt to argue, delay, or manipulate the situation. Legal strategies were in place to ensure that the transition could be enforced decisively. Every contract, every clause, and every historical document was reviewed. Nothing was left to chance. The main character knew that the strength of the plan depended on preparation, patience, and the element of surprise. The executive, oblivious to all of this, continued to present himself as the company's savior. He gave speeches, signed agreements, and celebrated minor successes. Each smile, each confident gesture, and each boastful remark only strengthened the main character's understanding of his overconfidence. It was clear that the executive had not considered the possibility that he was not the true owner. This ignorance would become crucial in the moments to come. The main character also considered the emotional impact of the coming revelation. Employees had experienced confusion, fear, and frustration under the executive's management. Any confrontation had to be handled carefully, ensuring that morale did not suffer and that the company's operations remained stable. The focus was on clarity, justice, and restoration, rather than punishment or humiliation. Patience, observation, and empathy were the tools for the final step. Finally, the main character began to outline a timeline. The moment to reveal the truth had to be chosen when it would have maximum impact and minimum disruption. Every piece of evidence, every employee insight, and every legal detail was accounted for. The plan was methodical, precise, and deliberate. The executive's overconfidence had created an environment where the truth could be revealed decisively and without dispute. As the weeks became months, the stage was set. The executive, proud of his perceived victory, smiled without suspicion. The main character, calm and patient, held the hidden power to change everything. Observation had revealed weaknesses, preparation had built certainty, and timing would ensure success. The company that had once been under threat of manipulation and loss was now quietly positioned for rightful restoration. The moment of action was approaching. Every detail had been considered, every possibility accounted for. The main character understood that patience and strategy were more powerful than confrontation or anger. The executive's smiling confidence, his overestimation of his own control, and his lack of awareness of the hidden legal truth would soon meet the undeniable reality. The story was moving toward a turning point, one that would leave the executives stunned and the company restored. Guided by patience, respect, and justice, the day came quietly. Almost like any other day in the office, but it was different. The main character had carefully chosen this moment. Lawyers were present, the employees who needed to know were discreetly in place, and every document was ready. It was time to reveal the truth. The executive, completely unaware, walked in with his usual confident smile, certain that the sale he had orchestrated was final. He was proud, as if he had accomplished something no one else could. He had no idea that everything he thought was victory was about to change. The main character called a meeting. Everyone was asked to gather in the conference room, including the executive and legal representatives. The air was tense, but calm. The executive's smile remained, though there was a subtle unease in the way he straightened his jacket. He had no idea what was coming. The main character began by speaking slowly, deliberately, calmly. Words were chosen carefully, not in anger, but in certainty. There was a quiet strength in the voice, a presence that commanded attention. The main character started by acknowledging the executive's work, the efforts he had made during the transition. This was deliberate, to avoid immediate defensiveness and to maintain control over the situation. The executive nodded, pleased that his work was being recognized. Then, with quiet authority, the main character presented the documents. Legal papers that showed the ownership had always belonged to the main character, transferred secretly by the father years earlier. Every signature, every clause, and every legal requirement was accounted for. The papers were clear, undeniable, and complete. For a moment, the executive's confident smile faltered. He glanced at the documents, then back at the main character, a flash of confusion crossing his face. It was the first sign of uncertainty, the first crack in the facade he had worn so proudly. The room was silent, except for the sound of papers being shuffled. The lawyers confirmed the authenticity of the documents. They explained that the sale was legally invalid without the true owner's approval. The executive's face changed. Pride turned into disbelief, then into a realization of the mistake he had made. Employees watched silently, sensing the shift. Those who had been uneasy under the executive's leadership now felt a sense of clarity and hope. The main character spoke calmly about the father's vision, the care he had taken in planning for the future, and the responsibility now entrusted to the rightful owner. There was no need for anger or retribution. The focus was on justice, restoration, and moving forward. Every word reinforced the certainty that this was not a personal vendetta, but the rightful reclaiming of what had always belonged. The executive tried to speak, but the words faltered. He attempted to argue, claiming the sale was final, that actions had been taken, and that contracts had been signed. The lawyers patiently explained that while his intentions may have been genuine, the legal reality was clear. Ownership had never transferred to him. Every attempt to assert control without the proper legal authority was invalid. The executive's confidence had been shattered, replaced by a mix of disbelief, fear, and humiliation. It was a slow process, but the main character remained calm, guiding the conversation and addressing concerns. Employees who had been anxious now felt reassured. Clients who had been concerned were contacted immediately, and every detail of the transition was explained. The company, once under threat of mismanagement, now had clarity and stability. The main character's careful planning and patience had ensured that the process was decisive, yet respectful and professional. The executive's demeanor shifted. His earlier arrogance was replaced by a quiet realization of the error. He had underestimated the main character, overestimated his control, and failed to consider the hidden ownership. His smile, once so confident, had vanished entirely. Every attempt to maintain composure was ineffective. The truth had been revealed, and it was undeniable. The main character's calm presence contrasted sharply with the executive's stunned confusion, emphasizing the authority and legitimacy of the rightful owner. In the days that followed, the company began to transition back under the main character's leadership. Employees, once cautious, now felt secure. Operations continued smoothly, with adjustments made where necessary to correct the executive's previous decisions. The focus was on continuity, stability, and honoring the father's legacy. The main character emphasized collaboration, communication, and respect, ensuring that the workplace environment remained positive and productive. The executive, meanwhile, faced the reality of his actions. There was no immediate punishment, no need for humiliation. The situation itself was corrective. The legal and procedural realities made it clear that the executive had acted without authority. His reputation suffered, but the main character's approach avoided unnecessary conflict. This careful handling ensured that the company's image remained strong. Clients remained confident, and employees felt supported. The balance between justice and professionalism was maintained throughout the process. The main character also reflected on the emotional journey. The loss of the father, the betrayal by someone once trusted, and the struggle to reclaim the company had been deeply personal. Yet the approach remained guided by respect, patience, and strategic thinking. The focus was on restoration rather than revenge. This mindset ensured that the company could continue to grow, employees could feel secure, and the father's legacy could be honored fully. Small acts of leadership, such as meeting with employees individually, addressing concerns, and listening to feedback, reinforced trust. The contrast between the main character's genuine care and the executive's earlier detached approach became clear to everyone. Loyalty that had been shaken was now restored, morale improved, and productivity increased. The company, once under the threat of mismanagement, now had a steady, capable, and rightful leader at its helm. The moment of revelation also served as a learning experience for everyone involved. Employees learned the importance of careful observation, patience, and understanding of organizational structures. The executive learned a difficult lesson about overconfidence, the limits of authority, and the consequences of underestimating others. The main character's approach demonstrated that leadership, combined with preparation, empathy, and patience, could overcome deception, arrogance, and false assumptions. As the transition continued, the main character began implementing long-term strategies. Plans for growth, expansion, and innovation were reviewed and adjusted based on careful analysis. The focus was on sustainable development, employee satisfaction, and client relationships. Every decision was informed by the father's vision, ensuring continuity and honoring the company's roots. The approach balanced respect for tradition with the need for modern growth. The executive, now aware of the full extent of his error, was eventually guided out of key decision-making roles. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting or humiliation. The situation had corrected itself through clarity, preparation, and legal authority. The main character had achieved the objective without unnecessary conflict. maintaining the company's stability and reputation while restoring rightful control. Throughout the process, the main character remained calm, collected, and focused. The revelation of ownership had been executed perfectly, respecting the company, the employees, and the clients. The executive's initial confidence and smiling pride had been replaced by a quiet acknowledgement of reality. The employees, reassured and motivated, began to work with renewed energy. The company, once on uncertain ground, now had a clear path forward under rightful leadership. The day the revelation occurred would be remembered quietly within the company. There was no celebration, no public drama. It was a moment of truth, restored justice, and careful planning. The main character's patient, strategic, and respectful approach ensured that the company remained stable. Employees felt secure, and the father's legacy continued unbroken. The executive's mistake served as a reminder that overconfidence and lack of foresight could have consequences. While the main character's approach demonstrated the power of patience, preparation, and rightful action, the weeks after reclaiming the company were both intense and calming. The intense part came from the need to stabilize everything: employee morale, client relationships, financial systems, and internal operations. The calming part was knowing that the rightful leadership was back in place, and that the company was now protected from deception or mismanagement. The main character moved carefully, balancing authority with empathy, showing the employees that their work mattered and that the future was secure. The executive who had sold the company quietly stepped back, facing the reality of his overconfidence. There was no need for public confrontation or revenge. The situation itself served as the lesson. Legal and ethical accountability had been restored. Employees watched this unfold and learned an important principle. Leadership is not about shortcuts or quick victories, but patience, preparation, and integrity. The main character's approach became a model for trust and responsibility within the company. From day one, the main character focused on rebuilding relationships. Employees had been uncertain and fearful during the transition, and some were hesitant to speak up. One by one, private conversations were held to address concerns, to listen to ideas, and to understand the challenges each team faced. This attention to individual voices strengthened loyalty. Workers who had considered leaving chose to stay, recognizing that the company had a leader who valued them and their contributions. Clients were also reassured. Meetings were held to explain the continuity of service, the integrity of the company, and the renewed vision for growth. The main character emphasized transparency, trust, and reliability. Many clients had noticed changes under the executive's management, and the reassurance was important. Over time, confidence in the company returned fully, and partnerships that had been uncertain grew stronger. The business began to thrive once again. While operational challenges existed, the main character approached each problem methodically. Each decision was weighed carefully, balancing the immediate needs with long-term goals. Employees observed the calm and measured approach, which contrasted sharply with the executive's impulsive and confident style. Morale rose steadily. Communication became smoother, and productivity returned to a healthy level. The company, once vulnerable, was now more resilient than before. Part of the focus was restoring the culture the father had built. It had been a culture of respect, care, and inclusion, where employees felt valued and motivated. The main character encouraged collaboration, recognized achievements, and created small rituals that reminded employees of the company's roots. Simple acts acknowledging birthdays, celebrating small wins, and listening to concerns reinstated the human side of the workplace. Employees began to feel proud and secure again. The executive, now removed from key decisions, learned the consequences of his actions quietly. There was no public humiliation, but the reality of the mistake served as a personal lesson. Actions taken without consideration for the legal and ethical framework could not stand. The executive's confidence had crumbled, and he came to understand the weight of careful planning, patience, and respect for others' rights. This lesson, though difficult, reinforced the importance of integrity in leadership. The main character also took time to reflect personally. The journey had been emotional, losing the father, facing betrayal, observing the sale of the company, and preparing for the legal reclamation. Yet through it all, patience and respect guided every step. The focus on justice without revenge allowed the company to be restored smoothly, maintaining relationships and protecting the dignity of everyone involved. The main character realized that true success was measured not by triumph over others, but by the integrity and stability of the decisions made. Long-term strategies were put in place to prevent similar situations in the future. Legal safeguards, internal auditing, and structured decision-making processes were implemented. Employees were involved in discussions about policies and governance, ensuring transparency and collective understanding. Clients were assured that the company's foundations were secure, and confidence in management grew steadily. The main character's vision included both growth and protection, creating a balanced approach to future challenges. One of the most important aspects was communication. Clear, honest, and respectful communication became a daily practice. Employees understood decisions, clients were informed, and external stakeholders saw the company's stability. This transparency created trust, which became the cornerstone of the company's renewed success. The father's principles had guided the company through the past. Now the main character ensured those values were upheld consistently. The main character also focused on innovation. With stability restored, the company was ready to grow and adapt. Plans for expansion, modernization, and new partnerships were reviewed carefully. Every decision was aligned with the core values of the company, ensuring that growth did not compromise integrity or culture. Employees were encouraged to contribute ideas, fostering a collaborative and motivated environment. The company began to move forward, stronger and wiser than before. As months passed, the company flourished. Employees worked with renewed energy and loyalty. Clients were satisfied and trust in the company grew stronger than ever. The executive, though aware of his mistake, was no longer central to operations and remained on the sidelines. The focus on restoration, transparency, and careful planning had ensured the company's stability. What had once seemed like a loss and betrayal had transformed into an opportunity for growth, unity, and clarity. The main character also remembered the father daily. Lessons from his life: hard work, patience, empathy, and careful planning were applied continuously. Every action taken in the company was guided by these principles. The father's legacy was no longer at risk. It was alive and respected, influencing decisions, culture, and growth. Employees felt the stability and inspiration of these values, and the company's environment was healthy and positive. There was a sense of quiet victory. Not in dramatic celebration, but in the smooth restoration of what was rightfully theirs. Justice had been achieved, but it was tempered with empathy and professionalism. The company was no longer a source of anxiety or betrayal. It had become a symbol of integrity, patience, and careful leadership. The main character had proven that true power lies not in quick triumphs or manipulation, but in preparation, patience, and ethical action. The final lesson was clear. Leadership requires more than ambition and confidence. It requires understanding, care, and foresight. The main character had demonstrated this through every step of reclaiming the company, managing employees, restoring client trust, and ensuring continuity. The father's vision had been preserved, and the company was positioned to thrive for years to come. The journey, though challenging, had a lasting impact. Employees felt secure and motivated, clients trusted the company, and the executive learned a difficult lesson about overconfidence and lack of foresight. The main character had acted with integrity, patience, and precision, ensuring a smooth and just resolution. The company, once vulnerable, was now stronger than ever. With a clear vision for the future, guided by principles, respect, and careful leadership, ultimately the story was not about revenge, but about rightful action, respect, and restoration. It demonstrated that patience, preparation, and ethical decision-making could overcome betrayal and arrogance. The main character had achieved not only the reclamation of the company, but also the restoration of values, trust, and stability. The company's legacy, built by the father, was secure, and its future was bright. The quiet victory was complete, and the story ended with clarity, integrity, and hope for the future.